Hello geographers, this video is to give you a bit of extra support for the first lesson that's in the London folder on Microsoft Teams, and that lesson is the global pattern of urban change. Now before we get started, we need to make some vocabulary very clear, and that is that the word urban means towns and cities and the word rural means countryside. If you did not know that, then please note that down because it is really important for this lesson. The first thing that I just want to go through with you is on slide 4, and it's this key term, urbanisation. When a lot of students are asked what urbanisation is, they will say that it's the growth of towns and cities. Unfortunately, it isn't quite that simple. Urbanisation is an increase in the proportion of people living in towns and cities. Now, what that means is that if you were looking at a country and you looked at that country's data from the year 2000 and it told you that 60% of the population lived in towns and cities, and then you looked at that country again with the data from 2020 and that percentage had gone up from 60 to 80, that is urbanisation. So it's when the percentage of people living in a country move from the rural areas into the urban areas. It's not necessarily the physical growth of the urban area itself actually becoming bigger, it's that the percentage or the proportion of people living there has increased. And the next thing that I want us to look at is on the next slide, slide 5, and it is this graph, which on first acquaintance looks really, really complicated, but it really isn't. It's simply showing you the urbanisation for different areas of the world and how it's changed from 1950 to 2050. Now 2050 is in the future, so part of this is predictions. This red line shows you where the known data finishes. Now it's a little bit old, it's from 2011, but everything to the right of this line is a prediction, and everything to its left is the known data. We have dates along the bottom from 1950 to 2050, and we have the percentage of urbanisation, so the percentage of people living in towns and cities going up the side. And all the different colours are just all the different parts of the world that the graph looks at. Mostly it is split into continents, but there are a few individual places. We have got the UK, which is this pink dot. We have got China, which is the black dots, and we have got the world as a whole, which is the pinky purpley dashes. Okay, so if we look at the world, we can see in 1950 that the world had urbanisation level of about 29%. And that if we follow the graph across, by 2050, that has gone up to about sort of 67%. So the level of urbanisation, the amount of urbanisation has changed over that time from 29% to 67%. And its rate of change is quite rapid. So that's two important pieces of vocabulary for you there. The level of urbanisation is the amount of people living in an urban area at any one time. The rate of urbanisation is the rate of change, the speed of change. Okay, so if we look at the United Kingdom, we can see in 1950 our level of urbanisation was already quite high, 79%. And then as we go along with time, it goes down a bit, goes up a bit, and then by the time we get to the predictions after 2011, we do have a rise, and it takes us up to about 86. So we do have a small change, but not a very big one. So for the UK, our level of urbanisation is high all the way along it, and our rate of change is small, because if we're already starting off at 79, we can't really get that much higher, okay? Whereas if we compare that to China, which is this black dot here, China starts in 1950 with a very low level of urbanisation, probably about 12%. It then increases really rapidly. So its rate of urbanisation, its rate of change is really quick. And then by 2050, we've got an urbanisation level of about 77%, okay? So we can begin to see the beginnings of a pattern, and we can break this down by looking at how developed or how wealthy countries are. So we've got LICs and NEEs, our low-income countries and our newly emerging economies. And then we've got HICs, our high-income countries. Now the UK obviously is a high-income country, and so high-income countries tend to have a high level of urbanisation And our recent rate of change has been slow because we've already got a high level of urbanisation. It can't go up very much further. Whereas the LICs and NEEs tend to have a lower level of urbanisation, but a rate of change that is very rapid. Now, there's different reasons for this. The UK industrialised a long time ago, starting in the 1800s with the Industrial Revolution. People were moving into the towns and cities, they were looking for work, they were working in the factories, working in places like the Docklands. London was the centre of a big British Empire. So we started that industrialisation way back in the past. So by 1950, we already had a lifestyle in this country where people lived and worked in the cities. So there isn't very much scope for change. Whereas in our LICs and NEEs, in 1950, most people lived in the rural areas. They were farmers. And so we are seeing that industrialisation happening now. So our industrialisation happened in the past, so we haven't got that much further to go. We can't increase because we're already high. Whereas in the LICs and NEEs, we are seeing that industrialisation happening now. Now, one area that kind of doesn't fit this pattern so well is South America, because we can see if this is the world average here, then if we look at the graph, most of the areas that we would consider LICs or NEEs, they start off underneath the world average and then either overtake it or start to get pretty close to it. But South America is a continent full of countries that we would consider NEEs, Brazil, Argentina, Chile. But yet in 1950, it's already above the world average. And by the time we look at the predictions, it's actually got the highest urbanisation levels of anywhere. Now, the reason for this is that a lot of South American countries were industrialising very, very quickly in the 1980s and the 1990s. Lots of people moving into the towns and cities. But as far as the sort of social and economic development of those countries go, they've had a hard time. There's been political scandals, there's been political upheaval, there have been economic crashes. So they are still considered to be emerging economies. But from this pattern, they follow more of the shape of a HIC than of an LIC or an NEE. But generally speaking, if we are looking at patterns and we are trying to give explanations, we can say that the HICs have high levels of urbanisation but lower rates of change, whereas LICs and NEEs have lower levels of urbanisation but higher rates of change. Okay? The last thing that I just want us to have a look at is on the very final slide, okay? And this is to have a look at this little homework question. Now, please notice it's about HICs, okay? And it is about counter-urbanisation. So counter-urbanisation is the opposite of urbanisation. It's when you have got people leaving the towns and cities and moving to the rural areas. Okay, so leaving the urban areas and moving to the rural areas. Now, the reason that people might be doing this in HICs is a growing dissatisfaction with the urban areas. They are considered overcrowded, expensive, they've got crime, they've got air pollution, and people that have got the money want to move out into the countryside. It's got cleaner air, what would be considered to be better schools. You can get a bigger house with more for your money, you can get a driveway, you can get a garden. So those that can afford it are moving from the cities into the rural areas. And this can happen partly because of the technology we've got developed in our countries. We've got really, really good transport networks. So people can commute, they can travel from the countryside to their place of work in the city easily. We've also got good internet connections. So it might be that people remote work, they don't go into the office 2 or 3 days a week and they work from home, and they can do that because of the internet. So that is what I want you to think about in this question. So why we have got this low rate of urbanisation, which is what I was just explaining with that graph, and why we have started to get this counter-urbanisation and what is allowing that to happen. So hopefully that's made a few things on this lesson a little bit clearer. If there's anything I can help you with more or anything you're not too sure of, then do drop me or your geography teacher an email and we'll do everything we can to help you. Okay, bye.